Welcome to What a Creep, the show with Margot Donahue and Sonia Mansfield talking about creeps from the past to the present.
This is your quick guide to the biggest creeps, jerks, assholes, and losers, the best of the worst.
From two nice ladies who want the world to be a little less creepy. Welcome back to What a Creep. This is Margot Donahue, and my cohort in creepitude, as always, is the amazing Sonia Mansfield. Hey, Sonia.
Hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend. Today we have an old, tiny creep, New York City history creep. If you guys, have seen HBO's The Gilded Age, one of the characters in there is actually a real person, Stanford White. He was an architect, and he built a lot of really beautiful buildings in New York, and Rhode Island. And he is a part of a very creepy murder, his own, by the way. He was part of it. He was the main attraction. And he was
main attraction.
And we'll get into his story in a second. If this is your first time listening, what we do is that we pick a creep from the past or the present, and then the other person is challenged to come up with a non-creep, either a person or a group of people, or we'll tell you something special. It's based on what's happening in the news right now. Yeah. Sonia's coming up with something for you. We have a basic Facebook page, but we don't really use it. It's just a place where people go to complain about the fact that we use salty language in this show. We use salty language in this show.
Fuck yeah.
So don't bother even complaining about it. The best place to interact with the both of us is in our Facebook group. It's the What a Creep podcast group. You do have to answer a few questions before you join. Just listen to the first 5 minutes of the show. You will pretty much get in there if you do pay attention. We are on Twitter and Instagram at What a Creep Podcast. Somebody had What a Creep on Twitter for 10 years and never used it, so we had to use Creep Pod.
That person is a creep.
Right. And we also have an old-timey email, whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. And Sonia, do you want to talk about our fabulous website?
I love talking about the website. It's my favorite thing. You can go to whatacreeppodcast.com, and it's everything you ever wanted to know about our podcast, but we're afraid to ask. It has links to all of our episodes, including our show notes, which include our sources, because we source every single episode. We are not making this stuff up. So you can see where we got all of our information from. We also pay for a lot of those sources. So we're trying to support the people that do the good work, the dirty work, if you will, yes. The dirty work for us. So go check that out. There's also a link to our merch shop where you could get t-shirts and face masks and journals and tote bags. And we recently discussed adding some new merch. So hopefully this weekend I'm going to sit down and design some The High Road Can Get Fucked stuff that you can get printed on things. I would like that on a t-shirt. So I'm going to do it. I'm doing it for me. Y'all can do it too. The holidays are coming up. Buy your The High Road Can Get Fucked merch for the friend in your life. And there's also a link to our Patreon page. You want to tell people about that, Margot?
Yes, go to Patreon. It's a place where you can go to help support this show. I want to thank Anime Match, Laura, Jennifer, and Joanne, all for joining this past week. We really appreciate it. It just goes help to run, like we said, to get those news sources and also to help pay for the hosting costs and things like that. And you get the first four seasons of the show there. You get 2 bonus episodes a month, and you also get a newsletter that Sonia comes up with every month. And she is wicked clever, so you want to be a part of it just for that. My God.
Thank you. You're a nice person.
I try.
You succeed.
If money is tight, though, and we totally understand that, if you could just leave us a review, a few stars, whatever, wherever you get your podcast. And I just want to thank, I've got a couple of people on my sheet, Sonia, that left reviews on iTunes. One of them is Griffey. And
Thanks, Griffey.
And Heather Leigh Nelson. Thank you so much for leaving us 5 stars. We really, really appreciate it. It gives us the happies.
It does, and it offsets the 1 stars from people who are like, that really hits me in my feels. Why do you hate conservatives and white people? Like, what? What a...
Right,
You
Max?
hate white people, 1 star. Would not recommend.
Are we ready to talk about our creep, Sonia?
I'm super ready. This is... I know nothing about this. Nothing.
The Murder of Stanford White. Did you watch HBO's The Gilded Age, or is that on your
I have
list?
not. It is on my list. My never-ending watch list.
He was not like a huge character the first season. I am
Okay.
very curious to find out what's going on, because the show right now, the first season, was in the 1880s. So it's when he's like, I would think in his 20s or so, that when he's
Okay.
like first, taking off in New York. But here we go. Architect Stanford White was one of New York's most venerated architects who built the second Madison Square Garden. There's been 3 or 4.
Oh.
They keep tearing them down and putting up something uglier. I don't know why. It's a real fucking
Cool.
bummer.
All right.
And the Washington Square Arch. That's the place where when Harry met Sally, when they first
Yeah.
came to New York, that's where they meet each other.
Yes.
That still stands today. In public, he was a bon vivant who moved with old school wealthy and the nouveau riche. He was also a creep who participated in the sexual assault of several young women as part of a group of entitled men in New York's high society.
Well, I'm glad that doesn't happen anymore.
Oh, right. Everything old is new again, y'all. This is going to be weird. Somehow, a creep, Harry Thaw, killed Stanford White. By the way, spoilers, we're just going to jump right in with it. He killed him on June 25th, 1906, because Stanford assaulted Harry's wife, Evelyn Nesbit, who we're going to be talking about. At the time, Nesbit was 16, or she was 15, or she was 14. We'll get to her in a second, but she was very young when she had met him. The trials of Harry Thaw caught the nation's interest and are part of New York City lore. It's also, did you ever see the movie Ragtime? It's a Milos Forman movie, early America. I'd say it's like 1981.
I have not seen it.
It's interesting. I was just watching
Okay.
it the other night. They have Norman Mailer playing Stanford White, who is one of our past creeps.
Yes.
This story has been told in different ways. They
Okay.
don't tell it exceptionally well in this movie, but in that movie, Ragtime. But it's interesting. And there's also The Girl on the Velvet Swing. It's like a Joan Collins movie that's not very good. The Red Velvet Swing. Not very good.
Okay.
A Velvet Swing. You know, like Pam and Tommy Lee supposedly had a swing in their place. That
Yeah, for very wholesome activities.
Very, very. We don't shame here, by the way. Whatever you want to do.
Correct. Yeah, man. If that's how you want to swing, do it.
Consenting adults, etc.
Yes.
The trials of Harry Thaw caught the nation's interest and are part of New York City lore. In this episode, we will discuss the major players and what happened to Evelyn after she outlived the creeps. She did outlive them, thankfully. Trigger warnings, sexual assault and abuse. The sources for this episode, Wikipedia for Stanford White. I'm sorry, my Siri was going crazy.
Oh, that's fine.
Avenue Magazine, Town and Country Magazine, FamousTrials.com, PBS American Experience, New York Times Archives, House Beautiful, and the book The Girl on the Velvet Swing by Simon Batts. Alrighty, so let's start with Evelyn Nesbit. She was born December 25th. She's a Christmas baby, either 1884, 1885, or 1886. No one is quite sure because her mother might have fudged the timeline. Here's the deal. She was born near Pittsburgh and her father had died when she was 10. And when she and her mother was broke after her father died. Mm-hmm. And men noticed Evelyn her name is Florence Evelyn Nesbit, by the way.
Okay.
So people noticed Florence when she was young, Flo. And, like the ads on TV, Flo.
Yes.
With John Hamm, those commercials are amazing. So Flo is a teenager, and I said that she's like the first Marilyn Monroe or sex symbol. I think she's more like the first Brooke Shields. She's a teenage model.
Yeah. Okay.
Like preternaturally beautiful. Like it's in almost like a creepy way because she's just so beautiful. And I put some pictures of her in the Facebook group, and I posted on her Instagram. And you can just type in Evelyn Nesbit images. Just type that in. She is astonishingly beautiful. And she was noticed by men, even out in Pittsburgh. And there's some rich dudes out there. There's Carnegies and stuff like that. And they noticed how pretty she was and said, you should go to New York and be a model, be an artist model. And there's this new thing called photography and advertising and magazines. And they have cover models. And you should look into doing that.
She's gorgeous. I'm looking at her right now.
I mean, I'm trying to think of not Razor's Edge, Cutting Edge. Who am I thinking of? The actress from...
Oh, Moira Kelly.
She kind of reminds me of her.
Yeah, I totally see that.
Yeah, it's like they say in my family, she's an Irish rose. Like she's just a really, she's pale skin, dark hair, light eyes. I mean, she's a beauty. And she became one of the most in-demand models in New York City as soon as she got there. And her mother fudged her age to be 16 so that she could work more. And this happens in Hollywood to this day. Parents do
Correct.
That. Or kids become independent so they can work 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
That's a whole other...
don't do that.
Don't do that, kids. I mean, it's just like...
You have plenty of time to work.
To work yourself to death, really.
Seriously.
She was one of the first Gibson girls. She was a fashion model. She was on the cover of all the magazines. She was a sculptor's model. She advertised like crazy. She didn't make a lot of money at it, but she was always busy. She was always working. So let's go into Stanford White. And Stanford White is the architect I was just talking about before. He was born New York City, 1853. And he became this architectural phenom. And he did all these Beaux-Arts. Like, you and I aren't actually architecture people, but he's like design freaks. But he's like revered. I mean, he had just all of these gorgeous over-the-top homes. He came from a very modest background, but he interned with the right people, and he's a white man and a good talker. And God,
why do you hate white men so much?
I know, right?
1 star.
He didn't go to like a fancy college to study what he did. He managed to get internships and study with people. And he happened to be an artist. Like he had that talent within him. He also had the gift of fucking gab. The guy could just talk to anybody about anything.
And that's a talent.
That is.
That's a talent.
It's a talent. That is, and that's something. Yeah, he did, and he did that very, very well. He married Bessie. They had a house in Long Island, and back then Long Island was just all mansions. And he had a life in New York, and he worked for McKim, Mead, and White. And as I said before, had lots of beautiful designs, was a part of the American Renaissance in the 1880s. This is when the Gilded Age is starting to take place. He's becoming the guy. And especially, he worked really well, high and low. He worked with the nouveau riche, the newly rich people and the high society people. And if you watch that show, you would see like the Carnegie Mellons and Rockefellers are like, ugh, who are these new people with their money? And he was like, I don't care. Money's money. But he knew how to talk between them in order to get the gigs and get invited to the parties.
And we have that now, by the way, here in San Francisco. There's definitely in the Bay Area, I should say, with Silicon Valley. So there's like San Francisco old money.
Yes.
And there's like new tech money.
And we have it in the Hamptons in New York.
Yeah.
And when I was growing up, we had cousins on my other side of my family, but they had homes in the Hamptons. And my mom, we would go out and visit them. And you would, at the time when I was young, you would not know what anybody was rich except the size of their house. They're much bigger now because, as they say, money talks, wealth whispers.
Yes.
And then
we talked about this in a bonus episode recently too. Yes. Right.
And that's true. I mean, that's what it is here. And so the old moneyed people were like, who are these people building these garish, Parisian mansions in the middle of Fifth Avenue, New York? Fifth Avenue, which didn't even have paved roads. It was just right. So we're like, what are we even doing here? But he got it. He understood that this is going to be a part of what's happening in the future. So he's married. He has kids. He has a place in Long Island. he's got this big mustache. He's a ginger, and he has like this huge handlebar kind of mustache. On top of all that, Stanford is in a group of men, with a group of men. They're out of the Union Club in New York. He belonged to all the clubs in New York that didn't take in Jewish people or black people or anything like that, by the way.
Cool club.
And they had a sex club. And the sex club, they would invite women, and sometimes it was sex workers or dancers or actresses, to parties, and then they would have sex parties, they'd call them. Stanford. Go ahead.
Did the women know what kind of party they were being invited to?
It's, that's a good question, because consent is a really hard thing to describe here, because some of them were really young, some are off the boat, some have been a chorus line for a while, and this is their last hurrah.
Okay. These
men are in age from like in their 20s, and just to hit it big, and they're not going to work for a living, and they're horny as shit. And this guy, they say a satyr. Is that the word? Satyr. It's when it's just somebody who's just sex obsessed.
Okay.
And there's men up into their 70s and 80s. And this is before Viagra, and they're still wanting to bone. I mean, that's they're just horny as shit.
All right.
Stanford had an office on 24th Street in New York, and it's like a mullet. It was all business up front and a party in the back. And you went through a room in the back, and that was like the sex part. And he had a swinging velvet swing, and he'd bring women in there. And sometimes there'd be multiple dudes. Sometimes it would be just him. They had orgies. And sometimes out in the open. Sometimes it was just in different rooms. This is long before the 1970s with the clubs and stuff like that.
Yes. This is very much reminding me of what we have here in San Francisco. Actually, I don't know if it's still a thing, but we had something here called
Sure you
Power.
don't, Sonia.
It's called the Power Exchange. And it has all kinds of different rooms for shenanigans.
There's something
between consenting adults.
But yes, exactly. And there was in New York, there was something, Plato's.
Oh, yeah. Plato's Retreat.
Right. That was in New York, and that was a place for swingers to go.
Yeah.
Whatever consenting adults want to do, and if they have a place to do it, and they could be safe.
For sure.
Fine. But that was their thing. Now, to the level of how much consent is involved, there's a lot of people that talk about how young the women were, and they were usually prepubescent, which I'm going to say doesn't mean that there's a lot of consent involved.
Correct. They're children.
Right. And Mark Twain even noticed it. So Stanford White notices... Anyway, so she goes from being this model, and then she wants to be an actress because she's finding modeling kind of boring. And Stanford White comes into her life, and she was modeling this kimono. And there's a picture of her that's pretty famous where she's wearing a kimono, and it was a $3,000 kimono. It was like a real original.
Oh my God, it's like so much money.
Yeah,
yeah.
For 1902 or whatever it was when they met. And he supposedly went on his knees and begged her to kiss the hem of her garment because she was so beautiful. She's, once again, a teenager. She's a kid. And he started pursuing her. And her mother was like, hey, he's got a lot of money. He could take care of us. And he started with things like, I'll pay your rent. I will fix your teeth for you. I'll take you to my dentist. He'll fix your teeth. I'll do this for you. I'll provide security for you. I'll provide this for you. And it was this slow wooing. And she thought he was old, and the mustache was weird. And she wasn't that into him, but he was charming. And the guy eventually got her to go on a date with him, And she thought it was going to be with another couple because she would not go places without a chaperone.
Okay.
She's 16. Or 15 or 14. I mean, she's young. Goes to the room with him on 24th Street. He gives her a drink. It tastes bitter. And she wakes up, and she's naked, and she has bloody legs. And he looks at her and says, never mind, kitten. You belong to me now.
So fucked up.
And she's looking at her and she's crying because this is her.
Yeah.
She was a virgin. She never had sex before.
Yeah.
She was waiting because she was really hoping to marry somebody with some money. And she didn't care if it was nouveau or old money. She just,
Right.
she wanted to meet someone respectable.
Yeah. And women's options were your choices were so limited back then. And you needed men to take care of you and be secure. It wasn't until the 70s that women could even open their own bank accounts and have credit cards. Right. We're talking about 1970s, by the way. I'm not even talking 1870s. So options were so limited, and something like what happened to her, even though it's not her fault, could ruin her. And it's fucked up.
And she'd seen what happened to her mother. Her mother lost her husband, and then she was destitute, and she had to move to New York, and they were scraping by. So, she did want to meet somebody that could take care of her. And she's like, well, I've got my youth and my good looks and my virtue. This is what I have to bring.
What a fucking asshole.
Yeah, he's a real asshole. And so they start dating. Like, she consensually dates him because she's now like, well,
she feels like she has to.
Right. And he has a family out on Long Island. Everybody knows about it. Nobody bats an eye. And she dates him for a couple of years, and then he's not going to leave. It's the thing. He's not going to leave the wife. She's always going to be just like a little plaything to him. Mm-hmm. So she eventually just breaks it off. And he's actually okay with it because at a certain point, he's like, all right, well, fun was fun, but... And then this is when she meets Harry Thaw. I think I wrote Henry someplace else, but it's Harry Thaw. And he was born February 12th, 1871, Allegheny City, Pennsylvania. He's from Old Money out near Pittsburgh. I think that's where Joe Montana's from. And he is this kook of a guy who's from a big, rich family. He notices...
Margot, I believe the term is eccentric when you're rich. When you're rich, he's just eccentric.
He's eccentric. He goes to school and then gets kicked. He's one of those. He goes to school, he gets kicked out. His family just takes care of him. And he sees Evelyn in a play. And he's so fucking in love with her, like on sight, like a lot of men were.
Yes.
That he went up to her and said, my name is Mr. Monroe. So he gave her a total false name. And he went to see her play 40 times before she would accept a date with him.
Okay, well, maybe that is love, because I don't want to see a play 40 times.
Yeah. Nope. Would.
Boring.
They go out, and eventually he says, you know what? Let's take a trip through Europe, and we'll bring your mother with us as a chaperone. And everything had been with a chaperone. Everything had been on the up and up. And she doesn't know him any better. And her mom's like, yeah, let's go to Europe. When are we going to get somebody to take us? This is right. A chance. And maybe you'll get engaged. He's single. Let's do it.
Like really single as opposed to fuckface.
They go to Europe and they're traveling around. And every once in a while, like Stanford White's name shows up in the society papers, or she reads about him and she gets kind of a, reaction to him. And he's like, have you ever had a boyfriend before? Have you ever been with somebody before? Because she wasn't having sex with him. Mm-hmm. And then one day, she basically confesses to him what happened between her and Stanford White and why she... and that she had a relationship with him, but that Stanford White, Stanny, why they broke up, but like it started, and then she dated him because he ruined her, and she didn't know what to do. I'm sorry, he didn't. She felt like
she probably felt that way. Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I'm talking in the parlance of the time. Like she felt like that. Anyway, so Harry goes into a rage. And he takes out his walking stick and he starts beating her with it. And he beats her and rapes her and traps her in the hotel room for the next couple of weeks.
Oh my God. And what about her mother?
And her mother eventually just is sent back home to America.
Oh my God.
And then he hires like a bodyguard to be their chaperone, but then after that she has to travel with him. And so
Right.
she travels with him for a few months.
Jesus, this poor woman.
Yeah. And they end by getting married in 1905. Like he brings her back and she marries this guy. And she's through trauma on top of trauma. Like this person.
This poor woman, men just want to possess her, and then they treat her so shitty. This poor woman. I feel so bad for her. This is awful.
Yeah. He marries her. They're out by Pittsburgh, and she's living in Pittsburgh for a year with him, and it's miserable. His family treats her like shit. Like she's just poor trash, and that
Right.
he could have done so much better. And sure, she's pretty, but so what? And that kind of thing. And she eventually convinces him, like, let's go to New York for a trip. I got to get out of here. Let's get out of here. And he says, fine. And they go to New York in the summertime. And one day they're at a bar and they see Stanford White. And she goes, oh my God, it's Stanford White. And he's like, that's okay. That's all right. You know, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple of days later, they're going to Madison Square Garden to see a show. This is Stanford's place. This is this building, and he was treated like a king there. And at the time,
Right.
they had a garden roof kind of place where they put on shows, and the rich people would go and see these shows. And he would have a table all to himself, and all these people would come over. So the Thaws are there, Harry and Evelyn, and then there's Stanford at a table with some people. And Harry, they're doing the show, and then in the middle of a really loud number, and the girls are on stage dancing and shit like that, Harry comes over and he shoots him right in the head with no word 3 times, right up close to his temple.
Damn.
Kills him right away. And in front of everybody, and then he just holds his hand up to the ceiling like, I'm not going to shoot any of you. And the director was yelling at the dancers, get back on stage, get back on stage. And they're like, fuck you. Like, no, we're hiding.
No.
We're terrified. Like, no.
Wow.
Harry gets picked up by the cops, and they take him downtown, and they said, did you do it? He goes, yep, I did it because he ruined my wife's honor, and I would do it again. I had to do it. It was. I'm a man. This man hurt my wife. I had to do it. He goes,
Damn.
Yeah. So he is sent. He's the DA. They goes to the grand jury, and the DA is going to set a trial. And then it's decided that Evelyn is going to go on the stand and talk about the abuse that she had through Stanford White, and she has to give all the dirty details, which is really upsetting.
Hard.
Hard. And they're going to say it was temporary insanity. Like he just had a moment where he just saw him and went, oh my God, and then just went over and shot him.
Yes.
They go to the jury. So they go to the jury, and it's a jury trial. In the first trial, the district attorney starts bringing up evidence that turns out Harry Thaw has a thing for beating up women and going nuts. That goes back for years, and whipping them with a rider's crop. He's
Jesus
really into whipping
Christ.
people. Yeah. Also, that Stanford was a real creep, and that he was really into young girls, into girls and sex.
Oh my God. There's creeps all around in this
Right.
case.
And then Evelyn is on the stand, and she's just telling her story. And it was like the New York Times, every newspaper covered this. And she's giving her story, and it's so traumatic, and she's giving all the details away, and it's in every single newspaper. And the jury just could not decide, guilty, not guilty. They just couldn't decide. So they had to go back, and they had to do a new trial.
Wow.
So several months pass, and then they have a new trial. And this time, Evelyn's story is kind of stale. So they have to lean in more about, no, this guy's really, really crazy. Like, you really, So then they really lean into Harry's a nut job. Harry is just kooky. Harry, all the words at the time. Like, you can't.
Do we know, is Evelyn like, oh, I hope he's convicted?
Evelyn doesn't know what to do. Evelyn has no idea.
I'm like, she's so trapped.
Because
so
she's
trapped.
with the family, and the family are telling her what she needs to do. She doesn't know what her rights are. She doesn't know. She's completely in shock and all this. This all takes place in under 2 years. Like, she marries him, within a few months he kills this guy. Then there's 2 trials, and she has to talk about all this crap in public.
That's traumatizing.
Very traumatizing. The second trial, he is convicted, but but he's guilty, but because he's insane, they send him to the insane asylum. Mm-hmm. He goes to the insane asylum, and it's at Madison, which is up in New York. And at the time, the maximum capacity at the asylum was, I should say, by the way, during his trial, he was served 5-course meals, like top meals. He had a full-size bed in his jail cell. Like, he had like the trappings of all like a rich guy has. So,
right.
And he thought he was just going to walk out and like, oops, I lost my mind one day, and boop, I hurt, killed somebody. Now I'm going to go home with my beautiful wife,
Yeah, he's never suffered any consequences for his actions.
Right.
Yeah.
He's never suffered any consequences for his actions. So they do take him, and they immediately take him out, and then they take him to the mental hospital, the asylum. At the time, it could only hold like 350 patients. They were supposed to. It held about 700 patients.
Wow.
So there was a lot of stuff that happened there that wasn't great. There was a lot of abuse that went on there.
Yes.
It was basically the patients running the asylum kind of situation. Mm-hmm. He was there for many years, and she would visit him. She wound up having a baby, a son, and she said that he was the father. Now, the last time she saw him was in October, and then the baby was born the following November. So it's kind of hard to believe that he's the father, but she always said he was.
Okay.
But she gave him his last name. And she was performing in New York, and then she was performing overseas. He was eventually released from the hospital. And then as soon as he got out, he one day was in Times Square, and he saw somebody come off of he was bisexual, by the way.
Oh, okay.
So his victims were men and women. Mm-hmm. And he saw a kid come off a bus coming into Times Square, and it's like, hey, do you need help getting used to New York? And the kid's like, yeah, I'd love that. And so he's like showing him around, and then he takes him to his hotel room, and then he locks the kid in his room and whips this kid who was like 16 or 17. And his parents he called the cops.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And the cops had to be called. And so the parents had to like pay his parents were paid like $100,000 to keep quiet about it.
Jesus.
He's a real, yeah. Evelyn eventually divorced him in 1915. He lived for a few more years. He lived to 1947, and then he died of a heart attack. And he
gosh.
He had like $3 million when he died. He never had to really work. He never really had to. He never really paid. I mean,
well, being eccentric is a full-time job.
He was in a hospital for a few years, and that was it. And the hospital apparently was not great, but that's the extent of what his. So he's a real creep. He
serious fucking creep.
Yeah. Evelyn went overseas, and for a while she had a show. She also did some silent films here in the States. She wasn't the best actress. She didn't have the best voice. She certainly didn't know how to sing. She tried doing a cabaret show like Luann from Real Housewives, but
money didn't buy me class.
Alec gets dessert. No. She tried to take care of her son the best she could.
Yeah.
She sold the rights to her stories in the 50s, and Joan Collins played her. And it's the woman in the red velvet swing. And it was a very cheesy version of her story. People,
for sure.
Because over the years, people couldn't tell the real story of what happened to her because it was pretty terrible.
Yeah.
Her son grew up to be a pilot, and he made a decent living, and he took care of her and was able to take care of her.
Aww.
And she passed away in 1967. She was...
Oh my gosh.
Lived a long time, yeah.
Yeah.
And she was 82 years old. She was married a couple of times, but in the end, she was just kind of on her own. And that was the story of the murder of Stanford White.
You did an awesome job on this. I was fascinated by this. You did such a good job.
There's so much more you can like kind of dive into because there's so many more rabbit holes you can explore. Like I said, we put everything in the show notes. You can kind of look this up for yourself. I mean, it was a scandalous story. I bet. And yeah, reporters showed up. Everybody was showing up for this. You know, she was, like I said, she had a whole act for it for years, you know, after these couple heads died. But yeah. And I'm interested now in the Gilded Age because how are they going to portray this guy? Like, are they going to like kind of hint about his, you know, so if you're interested.
Yeah. I'm like, show is moving up the list. Really, really good job, Margot.
Thank you.
Shall we take a break and then we'll do our non-creep?
Let's do it.
Okay. So I put together a different kind of non-creep for us this week. We've done stuff like this before, but one of the strongest hurricanes ever hit the United States this week and Cuba. And also the week before, a very strong hurricane hit Puerto Rico. And I did some research and I have put together a list of organizations that we can all donate to be helpful. I also want to mention that there are a lot of scams going on to people trying to cash in on this. It's fucked up. Like, I know we're doing non-creep right now, but there are creepy people out there who set up like fake, like GoFundMes and fake nonprofits and promote them on social media to try to like make money during stuff like this. So when you are looking to donate to organizations, like really go to the website and look to see if they have like a track record of actually delivering on the things that they're saying they're delivering on. You can identify like local initiatives and groups, and just don't people like calling and like sending emails soliciting donations. Like, don't just click a link and donate. Like, really, like, go to the website and check all that stuff out and like avoid like unfamiliar stuff. Like, so I put together a list. Like, you can go to Red Cross. Like, the Red Cross is a legit thing and they're everywhere. So that's a good one. But here's a couple of other ones that I thought maybe people would be interested in because, and I want to mention this, like, Florida is still in the thick of it. Florida has a governor and senators who suck ass. And like, if you can donate to like local groups, that will really help them because their politicians suck and Florida deserves better. And I hope they vote these fucking creeps out. And then we shouldn't forget about Puerto Rico, which was just hit a week before. Like, all of Puerto Rico lost power. I think power is still out for like 20% of Puerto Rico. Like, they don't have power. Even the hospitals are using like backup generators, you know, so there's just a couple of places. So Red Cross is always a great one. There is an organization called Caring for Others, and it's actually based in Atlanta, and they are creating a caring convoy. So you can donate to them. We're going to have links in our show notes to all of this. And they're going to like drive it into Florida. So that's a good one to do. There's one called AmeriCares, and they do medical support, and they're actually going in today as we're recording to Florida, and they're working with 148 local clinics and healthcare centers in Florida. They're asking for donations. So we'll have a link to that. There is one called Global Giving, and they do food and emergency supplies, and they're doing Cuba and Florida. So if you're looking to spread the wealth, so to speak. Roots of Hope is a nonprofit Cuban organization. They are collecting donations. And here's a really great one. This is this is the one I'm going to be donating to. It's called Convoy of Hope, and they are providing relief supplies to Florida and Puerto Rico. So if you're looking to help both with like one big donation or something, you could do that. I want to point out two more. There's an organization called Animal Lighthouse Rescue, and they have a sister location in Puerto Rico, and they help animals, obviously, and obviously soft spot. Like, these organizations are often overlooked during times because of course we want to help people. Like, I get it, but like, if we can help pets too, a lot of pets get separated from their people. They show up at a lot of these animal shelters and they just get swamped with animals. And, you know, if you can help, you can go to Animal Lighthouse Rescue. They're trying to help the ones in Puerto Rico. You know, everyone, my Maxie is from Puerto Rico, just saying. Max was a rescue from Puerto Rico. Aww. So I guess that's a little soft spot. There's also one called Project Hope, and that is helping emergency responders in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. So we're going to have a link to that one as well. So there's plenty here. There's another one called the Puerto Rican Civic Club, and they're here in San Jose, California, Margot's old stomping ground.
Yep.
And they are raising funds for solar lights and gas generators, and then they're going to be making a trek down to Puerto Rico to deliver that. So that's a good one too. So if you can spare a couple bucks to help these organizations, you know, definitely do it. If you can't, like, maybe share them on your channels and help other people find them so that they can donate. It's just like, anybody, if we could just help each other out during this time.
You feel so hopeless when you see these things, and especially
for sure.
Like Fort Myers was just like wiped out. I mean, just when you just watch that, you just feel like, what can I do? It seems so overwhelming. So thank you, Sonia.
It's super overwhelming, and there's just like, if you can even do just a teeny little thing, if everybody does like a little bit, it helps.
Yeah, it does.
So, yeah. So I'll have the list in our show notes.
Excellent. Alrighty then, that is the show today. Once again, our email is whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com if you have suggestions for creeps or non-creeps, or if you would like to get some stickers. Wherever you are in the world, we'll send you stickers. We've been doing that lately to other people around the world. That's been super fun. Also, we love it when you use the Annie Potts gift from Ghostbusters. We got one for your ideas if you want to use social media to reach out to us. Sonia, where can they find you?
You can find me at thesoniashow.com and The Sonia Show on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. And if you like the sound of our voices, we also co-host a podcast called Dorking Out, where we talk about movies. And we are like days away from October, which is Scary Movie Month, which is celebrated at F This Movie. So we're going to be doing scary movies for October, and we're going to do John Carpenter's Christine next. And it's going to be a really fun discussion. I like this movie, and there's stuff about it that's real funny.
I can't wait to talk about this with you. And it was one of my mom's favorite movies, so it's going to be a fun rewatch for me.
Yeah. And Margot loves Stephen King.
I'm a big Stephen King geek. You could find me at Brooklyn Fitchick, for Twitter and Instagram. My site is brooklynfitchick.com. I am on TikTok at Margot Donahue. Once again, thank you all for listening. Check out HBO's The Gilded Age. It's an awesome show. Stay safe and don't be a creep.
Creep!
Thank you for listening to us talk about creeps. You can follow us at What a Creep Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
But don't follow us too closely.
You can email us your creepy stories at whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com.
But please keep your dick pics to yourself.